Bismillah wa salatu salam ala Rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. As I will continue with the subject from the previous episode, At-Tajweed, and the relationship within our English mentality. As I develop words to portray the mental vision in order to present At-Tajweed as an independent method, which shows the difference between the understanding of the Arabi word applied to reciting the Quran or reading the Quran. Iqra aw qira'a. I cannot help but to mention the Ukrainian war. As we are informed, the nation of Russia aggressively desires to prevent the state of Ukraine to govern their society according to the will of the people, presenting to the world the oppressive memories of the late 19th century communist invasion of Central Asia. However, as Ukraine rests on the western borders of Russia, similar to Cuba, residing 90 miles south of the United States border. By the way, it is the same car distance from Newark, New Jersey to Philly. What is the difference between the Cuban Missile Crisis, which was an alleged small island nation desired to be allied with communism, and the Ukraine crisis of a former Russian protege now desiring to be allied with democracy as the political ideology equality is portrayed to the world? But then again, how many people knew that Cuba was once a protege of the United States? I must feel I should also detail the circumstances producing the Cuban Missile Crisis, which was the strengthening of the Cuban Revolution. While Soviet communism made an appearance 90 miles from Miami, supporting a revolution that never seems to be composized or described from the origin of the Siboney people's resistance to the European 15th century incursion by the hands of the Spaniards, who appeared to behave revengeful toward innocent people who had features which resembled the Muslims who cultivated the lands of Iberia. Is it possible this hatred toward the Muslims was because the Spaniards learned of At-Tajweed and became angered and jealous that there is no existence of such an essence in their language? Thus, they lied to the world regarding Spanish being the language of romance, which overshadows the Siboney national anthem, Guantanamera, displaying it to the non-Spanish mentality as a beautiful Cuban song generated by the influence of the romanceful Spanish language. Now, within the Russian image of aggression and being a warmonger, the idea that the NATO nations, as well as European Union, traded with this now criminal of the world to benefit from Russia's possession of petroleum. However, the rationale of preventing trade with Venezuela for petroleum was to prevent the criminals of that nation from being oppressive and aggressive with their ideology upon the people of the Venezuelan society. As I present this, I hope the viewers can now imagine a broader scenery surrounding the atrocities of Ukraine, if one can truly agree to broadest. Also, before I end this point, how much government money has been diverted from the common people of the United States who has a rights to the money, then sent to opposition groups in Russia and Cuba? But that's for another time. Now, let us direct the presence of At-Tajweed as a factor regarding understanding. The Quran is not read. Now, let us direct the presence of At-Tajweed as a factor understanding the Quran is not read according to the mentality of the English language function and behavior, nor is it understood as reading with the jurisdiction of the Arabi mentality. The Quran is always recited. The presence of At-Tajweed as the core structure for the recitation application is amongst the indication the Quran is not poetry, even though to the mentality which is accustomed to poetry, when hearing the recitation for the first time, while recognizing the Quran as a unique sound to the ears, compares what is hearing as poetry in order to attempt to distinguish this unique sound from other sound. This first time experience becomes amazing and beautiful, even if the one reciting is applying gross errors. As another thought to distinguish the Quran from poetry, it is stated hair is an extension of the nervous system. The name for hair in Arabic is sha'r. When a person's body experiences a commotion or a bang of emotions or the sense of feeling from which is from the nervous system, the name in Arabic is sha'r. Now, poetry in Arabic is named sha'ira. Other than those brothers who are super strong and deflect all kinds of earthly matters, those who were around for the harmonization of the Furious Five on the Super Rapping single know of how these 20th century indigenous poets profess their poetry, which ignited the sense of feelings, and some even had their hair stand up when the Furious Five was informing the people about Grandmaster. Other examples, for those who love the life of the desert, will react to Faisal El-Saad's Bushya single, as well as those older brothers who made profits from their business react to McFadden and Whitehead's Ain't No Stopping Us Now, which is interesting because those who are hustlers react the same way to find a raise over like a fat rat. You see, as for the listener, it does not matter because the English mentality is accustomed to music being within a religious worship methodology. However, music does not connect to the soul of a person in the manner the Quran connects. Due to the indoctrination of society, music connects with the emotions of the people who perceive this connection as soul appeasement. Yet it is spiritual due to the manner of intoxicating feelings. If you sincerely want to understand my explanation of spiritualism, order my book, Roc the Mike. In order to convince people to refrain from sincerely learning the Quran in the Arabic language, the society has presented any non-European worship as demonic, with the object of possessing people's souls. This propaganda was developed right here when the land was considered the wilderness of North America. Unfortunately, some Muslims of the English mentality behave with the hesitant apprehension as well because of the language barrier. Even though this barrier is not the only reason of the hesitant apprehension. You see, with continuous bombardment of the indoctrination of worship methods described as chanting and an incomprehensible verbalization as demonic, whether it is from education, books, and movies, the idea of worshiping in a non-English language initiates hesitation upon the English mentality. This may seem immature to those who have not fully grasped the authentic history of the wilderness of North America. Yet, among events which forced this perception was the abandonment of the people of color by the Ahmadiyya movement in America after the establishment of the state of Pakistan. While remnants of the movement still remain with small populations of people of color, their emphasis was not to learn the Arabic language, generating confusion as they emphasized learning Urdu language. I remember in the late 1980s, I became aware there were Muslims who engaged in this study because, after all, Urdu language was introduced as a language from the Muslims. Yet, the historical origin of the language is quite different from the language which the Quran has been revealed. Even though Urdu has been explained as an Indo-Pak language which allowed the Muslims of that continent to learn and memorize the Quran based upon the Arabic phonetic script in Urdu. For the English mentality, though, who pursued the learning of the Urdu language, they viewed it as a means to worship Allah. The problem with this endeavor is none of the English mentality seekers can direct another person of the same mentality the location of At-Tajweed within the Urdu script of the Quran, thus generating a principle of deviation. As people perceive to practice innovation, convinced it is an easy approach to achieve what their predecessors achieved without the original method being applied. Other educational structures can excel because of such innovations. Yet, the pursuit of success in principles of Islam has its own methodology. Therefore, a division was generated with the people who were perceived as knowledgeable, developing styles of articulation, discouraging the emphasis of learning Urdu. As these styles of articulation became populated, there were no locations that was easy accessible for the followers of the discouraging articulation to obtain lessons of Arabic. Even though Arabic mentality people were beginning to populate the inner cities. The results during this period became the language of Arabic being a far out obtainment, while those who adhered to acquiring Urdu became apparent. Within this far out obtainment, many Arabi stated the language was too difficult to share. Along with this, At-Tajweed was no more than a name people heard but never knew existed, like beef bacon. People who are not from Newark or who has not experienced the Newark flavor is convinced a person is crazy if they mention they only eat beef bacon. Unfortunately, this style of articulation of discouraging the emphasis on acquiring the Urdu language became the steam whistling when national organizations of Muslims immigrants which were unaware to many of the English mentality people began splitting based upon Arab and Indo-Pak ethnicity. The organizations that they possessed membership was somewhat invisible because these organizations promoted their existence within their respective languages, never having the objective to educate nor unify with the people of English mentality unless they were of European ethnicity, because after all, the European are the authentic Americans. which were few who became Muslim. Upon becoming Muslim, though, they were publicized near and far as an achievement of the growth of Islam within North America. Now, before the viewers becomes focused on ethnic partisanship, I am highlighting this scene because this hampered the attention for learning the Quran in a manner that would generate an accurate understanding of Islam based upon the lifestyle of the English mentality society in the United States of America. This aspect of the people who continue to adhere to the acquirement of Urdu language began another split. The division was not so much based upon annoying-filled emotions. For those who continued to pursue the Urdu language, it was a division based on perceiving a benefit, which the others who discouraged did not provide. So, as time passed, the Urdu-seeking travelers began also to change their behavior as well as their apparel. Their appearance became less present within the masajid of majority English mentality Muslims and more within the masajid of the majority of the Urdu mentality Muslims, such as the Masjid al-Medina located in Lower East Side of Manhattan on 11th and 1st Avenues. For some, At-Tajweed was obtained, as well as the possession of an impressive amount of Quran memorized, not particular verses based on a lecture. Along with this possession, the group also acquired a hadith memorized. Thus, there appeared to be a group of people who made hijrah within a lifestyle and behavior while residing in the cities of the United States of America. The disadvantage to this migration was there were cases among this group, children who began to view their parents' methodology as foreign. The methodology placed them away from the Black society, which they resided without comprehending of the difference between being a Muslim and the Black identity. Unfortunately, most of the English mentality people, the perception is the Black mentality or the Black identity is based upon ethnicity, yet is more accurately based upon a form of nationalism, originating from the separation of the indigenous Americans who accepted Christianity pre-1830s. So as history repeats as a result of the ignorance or forgetfulness of people, many of these children chose the Black identity instead of the foundation developed by their parents. Thus, the group of parents became elderly. Their endeavors passed with the movement of time, such as the masjid, which used to exist on 4th Avenue and North 17th Street in East Orange, New Jersey, which is now an empty lot. The remnants of this generation of children from Muslims are their names, as some was born with beautiful Muslim names as they filtered into the society, with others perceiving these once children's are from a Black identity 1960s experience. However, there exists other children who continue to maintain the foundation which they were raised upon by their parents. Many of them were not flamboyant in a manner Muslims would know their family background, as they continue to live according to Islam and not be viewed as the next generation who were from this Urdu language seeking people. The disadvantage to this continuation without being noticed is the history of a people has been lost. allowing the continuation of the theme. All people of color from the English mentality initially became Muslim by way of the penal institution. Now, the interesting comparison of this theme is all people of color from the English mentality initially became free from Anglo-American slavery system. Both these themes are misdirections of history. This generation were some who shared their family history with their children and had the ability to strengthen the identity of English mentality Muslims based upon their knowledge. However, some have obtained a proficiency of reciting the Quran, which could enable those of the English mentality to identify the mental barriers which inhibit them to achieve acquisition of the Arabic letters in a manner to recite the Quran, as there is a difference between acquiring the Arabic letters to the level of reciting the Quran and acquiring the level of understanding the Arabic language. By the way, presently, there is an increasing population of Muslims who are from the English mentality who know the manner of reciting the Quran with the Arabic letters. Yet, few have a comprehension of their recitation. As the focus appears to be directed towards acquiring reading capability, there appears to be a distortion regarding basic comprehension of the collection of words which form the verses of the Quran. For several years since this presentation, people have consistently described the Arabic language as vast and precise, such as the words for rose, lion, and camel, which describe the position of action of these nouns with one word exclusive to these nouns. As this seemed impressive, the English mentality seekers of reciting the Quran then are discouraged regarding the recitation because inhibitors are positioned within the mental scene, convincing them of being cautious of basic comprehension of the words that are presenting their expression to its reader. These inhibitors are the same barriers existing in the language of English, which was constructed in order to prevent the once indigenous Americans from independently possessing the language after being convinced they were being taught the English lifestyle, which will make them civilized, according to the perception of the invaders. With such endeavors, the people would have generated an authentic American English mentality, or thus the pattern of indoctrination continues because the possession of the Quran is more powerful, with the capability of empowering people in a manner which cannot be predicted nor defined. As the people maintain the condition of worshiping Allah sincerely with complete heart desire. As in Surah Az-Zumar, question is presented in the third verse. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. قال الله تعالى ألا لله الدين الخالص. Is not to Allah the lifestyle of sincerity? If an individual has confusion regarding this lifestyle, one should first analyze his personal soul, as the place of sincerity begins in the heart. No one can acquire such heart desire from a scholar or an educational institution, regardless of the reputation of the scholar or educational institution. Sincerity is that unseen particle which intertwines another unseen particle, intentions, which both resides in the heart. This particle is understood yet unwritten word within the known statement regarding من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له. Allah guides whom He wills, and He leads astray whom He wills. The generalization which is detailed in the biography of the two first sons of our father Adam alayhi salam. The sacrifice or qurbani was accepted from Abel or Habil. Since the other brother's qurbani was not accepted, he committed an act which was the first evil crime of its kind from man on earth: murder. Along with this awareness of seeking perfection within oneself, the verses beginning Surah An-Naba relays the behavior of the Quraysh towards the revelation of the Quran in specific. Yet, we can experience this behavior dealing with a person when asking a question. Regardless of the answer, the person still would desire to debate, generating venom and tension because of opposition to the subject of the discussion. Unfortunately, after this experience, many people attempt to develop counters to such opposing discussions, which diverts the focus to the place them within the trap of the initial questioner. In the same manner, the counter of the description of the Messenger of Allah being illiterate has been a center of focus. Thus, we learn from the surah to remind people of their oath to Allah and the demise of the group who chooses to neglect the oath, and the benefit of the group who chooses to maintain the oath. The society captivates us all with convincing discussions supporting or rejecting without the remembrance of Allah's commands and guidance, victimizing people without fully understanding the diversion with lengthy, consistent counter discussions. As the example of a woman believing she would be the first of her people to have a career within the halls of the Senate floor, promoted as equal to Eleanor Roosevelt and Shirley Chisholm. Unaware to many is the heartbroken news of some observers who now can compare this once fiery converser with being the equal to Pocahontas, the indigenous young woman who had the natural rights to the land which is now the state of Virginia, who was paraded within the English society as the savage princess who became civilized and captivated with the invaders' lifestyle. The after effects of Pocahontas were other women following her pattern after she married Englishmen. Amongst these women was one of my ancestors, Allie Raines, whose husband was an American Revolutionary veteran from Virginia who migrated into the former Tuscarora land, which afterwards became Wake County, North Carolina, the county of the famous Wake Forest University. So, will this same pattern appear with the young women in hijab following the same footsteps of the political converser? In society today, counter-conversing about a subject keeps the public totally distracted and mentally exhausted. One can reflect and observe the manners the Senate performed counter-conversing regarding assisting the citizens of the nation. Yet, the same group did not converse with multiple counters regarding financing the state of Ukraine, distracting the citizens about their financial problems, only to send money to others while indoctrinating the public, they are living a privileged lifestyle compared to the world who envies the citizenry of the United States of America. But I guess that would not be in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, Newark, Philly, Detroit, South Side of Chicago. Well, to keep it moving. This concludes this segment of the presentation. If any benefit has been acquired, then it's from Allah. Any errors are from me, and I seek the forgiveness of the Lord of the worlds. Assalamu alaikum.